SC. It's okay, I don't want to be alone. TM. That said, I do have some church family questions for you. SC. Okay, shoot. I don't think it's separate from our ruminating philosophies on physics. TM. My mom said you don't have a family. You were adopted. SC. Yes, I remember too. I wouldn't say I don't have a family. I was adopted and the experience was important. I can think of a brother, a sister, a cousin, an aunt, a grandma and a grandpa I enjoyed spending time with. TM. So you had a family, but you've never been married. SC. No. I can't imagine how this is relevant. I'm chalking it up to youth for you. TM. Okay. I just wonder what you do all day. SC. I spend a lot of time thinking. I walk a lot. Sometimes I masturbate. I sell things. You're wondering about purpose. Like, am I wasting my time and talents? Let me worry about those things. TM. Okay. So my question. It says all throughout the Bible that Jesus came to save, that anyone who believes in him has eternal life. Do you think, is your personal opinion, that the Bible is evil? I don't know how to put it. SC. No problem. That kind of promise is evil. No, I hope not. No way to know for sure in the form of a letter or apologetics. I think we take in as much as we can of what came before us, and then make our mind up. Maybe like Thomas Jefferson and slavery. I think as kids we're swept up with the momentum of what's happening. In adulthood and especially in our 40s the water starts to recede a bit. We hope for some progress by then. I'm not likening the Bible to slavery either. It's more like we drink in the water of other people's methods in our youth, and as we get older, the water starts to flow back down a little, like your water feature. It's not just taking it in now, passively gaining traction to find out what the world is, but experiencing it as someone who's in charge with the capacity for making decisions, still learning as you go. The meanings have always been the point of inflection. I think we are going different directions by Orient, so I don't see a dichotic dualism or nature for the perspective of chasing contrast to meaning. I don't think it's about first principles, I think it's just orientation. TM. Like the meaning of salvation. I don't think you ever explained what you meant. What you think it means. SC. I did. TM. So you don't think the Bible is wrong, you think it's people's meanings. Like my own church experience. SC. The point of biblical inerrancy is the connotation of accuracy for interpretation. The content could be accurate, but what is the value of perfection in the way they mean? Even if it's number or letter perfect, it would still be referring to the perfection of someone else. Then and more distantly, someone's account of someone else's experiences. I think they can argue for someone else's perfection, but I don't think we can gain anything more personally true or false from the notational impression than the inspiration intended. I guess we're just hoping for a confident inspiration that is external to the experience. Perfection by number, letter, page, book, whatever that means to them. Those demands can have consequences. TM. How do you mean? How could it be inspiring if you're not positive somehow it's accurate? SC. The doctrine of inerrant perfection for any given space of content is like by logic that game Plinko from The Price is Right. We know as Christians or people attaching our identities to the content that we either agree that it's perfect, or arbitrarily start defending our own interpretations not just of meaning, but the more critical skeletons of base content. Everyone has a right to their meanings, but fallible base text might ruin everything. We wouldn't know as passive attendees if the pretextual content was accurate, making the explanation something we might listen to, but what to pay for. Perhaps performance. Passive attendance might not make sense outside of just curiosity. Consider how vulnerable the faith is to a doctrine of inerrance. How far we get in our agitation of defense from the Christ-like purpose of inspiration. Just agree the Bible's inerrant to be inspired. Like a Plinko chip descending down a path that eventually says inerrancy, the agreement to agree that whatever it is and however it is given is perfect already, allows everyone to start from the safe space of accurate content. This is the way the sudden determination happens by process and is sort of like a ball following the path of least resistance to a place of stable equilibrium, the bottom. I consider it by process to be descriptive for the logic of loss momentum, judged by their angle or view as the conclusion coming at them from the point or resting seat of gravitational authority. Tm. So for you, if you were to read it, you could think of it as possibly inaccurate and inspiring. Do you imagine there would be any benefit to something that was false and inspiring? Like physics, for example. SC. The point of description, I think, was to relay his life, eventually his death, to relay a story. As a quick honesty, I think part of his salvation was a warning around going above the 7.07 horizon line with strangers without knowing for sure what you're doing and why you're doing it and how to a certain extent it's being done, and he marked like a description on a map where contextually we as a species. Confidence isn't a lack of fear, part of it is a growing understanding of our environment, the slow roll of our capacities to a point where we realize we are in a class 0 civilization that could otherwise be generally very scary. Another angle of his salvation may be a certain amount of pseudo-scientific mummification. Something for everyone. From the context of the description, I don't think anyone believes in terms of total capacity. Jesus left his best on the field. It was for him, I'm thinking, enough to get the job done. Suspicion arises over time about peculiar people, and they begin to be tied to peculiar circumstances. Sacrificing one peculiar thing might abate the peculiar circumstance. Animal sacrifice slowly weaned humanity away from human sacrifice. Jesus did something more but better. Tm. Interesting, but I like to flesh out some things sideways before asking for a direct explanation. So the Bible, you could read it and be inspired even if you thought it was inaccurate, but what would be the point of remembering anything? My mom said you had a freak memory, really accurate even with the Bible. SC. There's a spectrum probability that anything relayed by language will carry the fallibility inherent in describing the accumulative sensation. I think generally the argument is about the fallibility of language, a perfect example and an advocate of reprocessing what was written perfectly. The memory might not be mined with brain storage as much as a relevant umbrella of tension to host the performance. I wasn't looking for an identity, a weird thought for me even when I was young. The first thought of approach is what is it, and with the Bible especially I took it seriously because it seemed to have an approachable in one way but also conquering impact over so many. It seemed to be used as a crowbar for justifying identity, leveraging opportunity. I was curious why so many yielded to anyone who used its messaging. Why anyone would be willing to so seriously engage in justification and not just in learning. It looked charming, desperate, maybe confusing. Remember, I was only like 20 when I started reading. By the time I reached my mid-20s I knew it fairly well, and the greatest advantage I have had almost always with people who consider themselves formally trained in Bible teaching is that they always believe their equilibrium of duty-bound persistence will outweigh the results of my excitement for opening up a new world of interpretive synthesis. They won't learn or remember that much beyond what they are tested on or expected to know. The outcomes of relevant retention are based on why they approached the information in the first place. The Bible is a tool for what I call bridge gap fillers, persistence liability with the Bible as crowbar. When they come at you with one, and especially by memory, after all you could have carried one around yourself, they're probably not after nothing. TM. The prism of preference you enter with will determine what you can experience on the other side of things. The before and after is a contrast, isn't it? It just keeps going, evil then good, not eternal now eternal. I think I see what you're trying to say. SC. Good one. Sounds deterministic. If you think of it as symmetry inverse against expressing the supersymmetry potential that might help. All of the statements, no matter what they are, will have this sort of forced alignment against potential tinge to it. Waiting with appreciative adherence is part of it for us, has been part of it for me even. Waiting with appreciative adherence for Jesus to come back so we can not only experience the contrast of what isn't perfect, but also as someone else is something different. I think the confusion with them is they're agreeing to be an inverse expression as a human now, as long as they get to experience the expression or performance of supersymmetry when they die or sometime in the future. As long as there is more than one of us, it is more like our performance is supersymmetrical. The thing they have with Jesus is they think he's the declared expression of total supersymmetry by expression, capacity in performance. In that sense, though, they don't care about Jesus really. The example could be anyone for them, it's just a matter of who it is that can deliver for them as an experience in waiting, the capacity of performance. His inspiration performance, I think, gave us room to breathe, so we could experience in our own way our own contribution to the overall performance. Linguistic conceptual attachment, however sincere, is similar to the shortcuts in the Hobbit movies, if you get my dirt without having to explain too much, but like heat radiance there is a time limit to how much they can take. Like wrapping up those desires in a cocoon of restraint for a kaleidoscopic journey of endurance-seeking contrast. In the sense of doing our part towards the supersymmetrical performance or project, expression, however you want to put it, the clumsy statement of the wizard to Dorothy at the end, "I don't know how it works," makes sense to me now. Eventually, by experience, we know our part, but we really don't know how it works. I mean this differently to someone turning on a light switch or using a computer. Like riding a bike up a new trail or down to a strange city, we know what we're doing but we don't know how it works. TM. So as an example, maybe they're just using someone else's perfect messages for their own benefit. The price of right on one hand as inverse symmetry, the price is right in the other as the supersymmetry potential. What do you think? Pushing your hand down on a trampoline, using the sensational gravity of inverse contrast to sell supersymmetrical certainty but as a potential memory of something far off.